Listen, I'm going to be straight with you, because most people won't. We all want to be liked, respected, and trusted, but the truth is, sometimes we get in our own way. It's not the world that's against us, it's the habits we carry. And here's the kicker, half the time we don't even realize we're doing them. These little behaviors, things you think are harmless, are the very things that push people away. Today, I'm going to walk you through 15 specific habits that make people dislike you, and I want you to pay attention, because once you see them, you can change them. And when you do, people don't just start liking you, they start respecting you. Constant negativity repels people because it drains energy, creates tension, and makes interactions feel like a burden rather than a connection. Think about how you feel when you're around someone who always complains, always focuses on the worst possible outcome, and constantly highlights what's wrong instead of what's right. It doesn't matter if you care about that person deeply or if you're just casually acquainted, eventually that negative outlook seeps into your own mood. Human beings are naturally wired to mirror the emotional states of others, so when you spend time with someone who is persistently negative, your body and mind begin to respond in kind. You feel heavier, more tired, and less hopeful. People may not always consciously realize why they're pulling away from someone, but often it's because they simply don't want to carry the weight of that negativity anymore. Negativity can show up in subtle ways. It isn't always outright complaining or constant pessimism. Sometimes it's sarcasm that cuts too deep, criticism disguised as just being honest, or always pointing out flaws in others while never acknowledging strengths. Over time, those patterns add up. Instead of seeing you as someone who brings value or joy, people begin to associate your presence with discomfort. They anticipate that when you walk into a room, the conversation will shift in a darker direction, or their ideas will be dismissed, or their excitement will be dampened. It's not that people expect you to be unrealistically cheerful or to pretend problems don't exist, but there's a massive difference between addressing challenges constructively and constantly radiating negativity. The danger of being overly negative is that it masks itself as realism. Many who fall into this habit defend it by saying, "I'm just being real," or "I'm not negative, I'm telling the truth." But realism without hope is just pessimism in disguise. People don't admire you more for being the one who points out why something can't work. They admire those who recognize difficulties yet still look for solutions. When negativity is presented as truth, it leaves no room for growth or improvement. It's a dead end. That's why others begin to distance themselves, because deep down they know that negativity doesn't build anything. It destroys trust, motivation, and even respect. There's also the fact that negativity doesn't just push people away socially, it also limits opportunities professionally. Nobody wants to collaborate with a colleague who shoots down every idea before it can even take shape. Leaders don't want to promote someone who drains team morale. Even in personal relationships, friends and partners grow tired of always trying to lift up someone who refuses to see the light in anything. Over time, negative energy becomes a pattern people recognize and avoid, even if they can't always articulate it. The result is fewer invitations, less connection, and more isolation. It's important to understand that constant negativity doesn't only affect how others perceive you, it also influences how you see yourself. The more negative you are outwardly, the more your brain starts to cement those patterns internally. Negativity becomes your default lens, and suddenly you're not just disliked by others, you begin to dislike your own life. The cycle feeds itself. The less positive interaction you receive, the more negative you feel, and the more negative you feel, the more you drive others away. Breaking that cycle starts with awareness. If you notice people pulling away, it's worth asking, am I someone who brings light into a room, or am I someone who takes it away? Because the truth is, negativity isn't just a minor flaw, it's a repellent, and the sooner you take control of it, the sooner people will want to lean in rather than walk out. Talking too much and not listening is one of the fastest ways to make people lose interest in you. because at the core of human connection is the need to feel seen and heard. When someone dominates the conversation, endlessly sharing their stories, opinions, or complaints without pausing to give space for others, it creates an imbalance. The listener doesn't feel engaged, they feel used, like they're simply an audience instead of an equal participant. Over time, that dynamic becomes exhausting, and people instinctively begin to withdraw. They may not politely give short responses or even fake interest, but in their minds, they're already deciding to spend less time with you. Conversations are meant to be an exchange, not a monologue, and when that balance is lost, so is the opportunity for real connection. Talking too much often comes from good intentions. Sometimes it's excitement, nervousness, or a desire to prove yourself. You may have a story to tell, knowledge to share, or an experience you're proud of. But without awareness, that enthusiasm can shift into self-centeredness, where you're so focused on getting your words out that you forget to invite others in. People begin to notice that their input isn't valued. Their contributions are cut off or overlooked, and they leave the conversation feeling smaller than when they entered. Nobody likes to feel invisible, and if you create that dynamic repeatedly, people will avoid engaging with you, even if they can't articulate why. Another issue with talking too much is that it signals insecurity. When you flood the air with words, it often comes across as an attempt to control the situation or to hide discomfort in silence. Yet silence isn't your enemy. It's where reflection and deeper connection happen. Confident people don't feel the need to fill every gap. They use pauses to create space for others. In contrast, someone who dominates the dialogue can seem needy for validation, constantly seeking attention through their words. This creates an impression of imbalance, where instead of being a confident and composed individual, you appear desperate to be liked, which ironically has the opposite effect. Not listening is equally damaging, if not more so. When people talk, they are offering you a piece of themselves, their thoughts, feelings, and perspectives. If you don't pay attention, if you're just waiting for your turn to speak, you send a clear signal that you don't value them. This lack of presence is felt immediately. People can tell when your eyes glaze over when you interrupt, or when you respond with something that clearly shows you weren't paying attention. That erodes trust. Why should they confide in you, share with you, or spend time with you if they know their words won't matter? Listening is the most basic form of respect, and without it, relationships of any kind, personal or professional, cannot thrive. The truth is, being a great conversationalist has less to do with what you say and more to do with how well you listen. People walk away from a dialogue not remembering your exact words, but remembering how you made them feel. If they felt heard, valued, and respected, they'll want to come back. If they felt dismissed or overshadowed, they'll start distancing themselves. That's why people who talk too much often don't realize why others avoid them. From their perspective, they were just being friendly or enthusiastic. From the other person's perspective, they were silenced, diminished, or drained. To build stronger connections, you have to understand the power of balance. Share your thoughts, yes, but then step back and invite others to share theirs. Ask questions, show curiosity, reflect back what you've heard to prove you're listening. The goal is not to dominate the spotlight, but to create a meaningful exchange where both sides feel enriched. When you shift from speaking endlessly to listening intentionally, people notice the difference immediately. They not only begin to like you more, they trust you more because you've shown them that what they say matters. And when people feel heard, they feel connected, and that is the foundation of respect, loyalty, and lasting relationships. Being unreliable or breaking promises is one of the most damaging habits when it comes to building and maintaining relationships, because at its core, reliability is about trust. When people trust you, they feel safe investing their time, energy, and emotions in you. They know that if you say you're going to do something, you'll follow through, and that consistency creates stability. But the moment you begin to show patterns of flakiness, canceling plans last minute, forgetting commitments, or making promises you don't keep, that trust begins to erode, and once it's gone, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. People may still smile at you, still engage on the surface, but deep down, they start to doubt your word, and doubt is the first step toward disconnection. Reliability isn't about being perfect. Everyone occasionally makes mistakes, gets sick, or faces circumstances they can't control. What truly matters is whether you honor your commitments most of the time, and how you handle those rare moments when you can't. A reliable person takes responsibility, communicates clearly, and tries to make things right. An unreliable person, on the other hand, often offers excuses, minimizes the impact of their behavior, or dismisses the disappointment they've caused. Over time, those patterns teach others a painful lesson: your word doesn't mean much. And once people learn that, they stop depending on you altogether. Breaking promises isn't always intentional. Sometimes it comes from overcommitting, saying yes to everything because you don't want to disappoint anyone in the moment. You agree to help with a project, to show up for an event, to handle a responsibility, but then you realize later you don't have the time, energy, or resources to follow through. In your mind, you think people will understand, but what they actually experience is betrayal. From their perspective, you valued the comfort of avoiding conflict when you made the promise more than you valued their trust. And in that moment, your credibility takes a hit. People would rather you say no up front than say yes and then fail to deliver. Another aspect of unreliability is the message it sends about priorities. When you cancel plans repeatedly or don't show up when you said you would, the unspoken message is clear. Something else was more important than them. Whether or not that's true doesn't matter. Perception is reality in relationships. Friends, colleagues, and even family members may begin to feel like they don't matter to you, and that sense of being undervalued pushes people away faster than almost anything else. Over time, they stop inviting you, stop asking for your input, and stop trusting that you'll be there when they need you. Reliability also plays a massive role in professional life. In the workplace, your reputation is built on your ability to follow through. A person who consistently delivers on deadlines, keeps their word, and can be counted on becomes invaluable. In contrast, someone who is unreliable not only frustrates their team, but also limits their own opportunities. Managers and colleagues won't recommend you, won't trust you with bigger responsibilities, and won't see you as leadership material if they can't count on you to handle the basics. You might be talented, creative, or full of potential, but without reliability, all of that is overshadowed by the lack of trust in your consistency. At the end of the day, reliability is less about grand gestures and more about everyday habits. It's about doing what you say you'll do, showing up when you said you would, and being a person whose word holds weight. People don't expect perfection, they expect honesty and consistency. When you're reliable, you become someone others can lean on, someone they respect and value. But when you're unreliable, you become someone they learn to live without, and that shift is where relationships begin to fade. Reliability isn't flashy, but it is powerful, and it's often the dividing line between people who are deeply trusted and those who are quietly avoided. Disrespecting boundaries is one of the quickest ways to make people dislike you, because boundaries are not walls meant to shut you out. They are guidelines that define how people want to be treated. When you ignore or dismiss those limits, what you're really communicating is that their comfort, needs, and feelings don't matter to you. Boundaries can be physical, like personal space, or emotional, like how much someone wants to share about their private life, or even practical, like how much time they can give. Every time you cross one without permission, you chip away at the trust and safety that make relationships work. People may not always confront you directly, but they will begin to distance themselves because nobody wants to be around someone who consistently disregards their limits. Disrespecting boundaries often shows up in subtle ways. Maybe you press someone for personal details they're not ready to share. Maybe you show up uninvited or expect their time and attention whenever it suits you. Maybe you push your opinions on them, even when they've made it clear they see things differently. On the surface, these actions might seem harmless or even well-intentioned, but the underlying message is that your needs and desires take priority over theirs. That dynamic makes people feel unseen and undervalued, and over time, resentment builds. Another way people cross boundaries is by assuming familiarity that hasn't been earned. For example, making jokes that are too personal, invading physical space, or prying into private matters. While you might think you're just being friendly or showing interest, the other person may interpret it as disrespect or even manipulation. It's important to recognize that every individual has a different threshold for what feels comfortable. What's acceptable to one person may feel intrusive to another, and the only way to know is by paying attention to cues, both verbal and nonverbal. Ignoring those cues, or worse, dismissing them when they're pointed out, sends a strong signal that you don't respect their autonomy. In professional settings, boundary issues can be especially damaging. A coworker who constantly interrupts, a manager who expects you to work beyond agreed hours, or a colleague who overshares personal drama creates an environment where people feel exploited or uncomfortable. Respecting boundaries at work isn't just about courtesy, it's about professionalism. Those who consistently violate them quickly gain a reputation for being difficult to work with, regardless of their skills or contributions. People want to collaborate with those who can balance ambition with respect, and when you fail to honor that balance, you limit your opportunities and isolate yourself. Boundaries also matter deeply in close relationships. With friends, partners, or family, ignoring limits can feel like betrayal. For example, if someone tells you they need space and you bombard them with calls or messages, you're not showing care, you're showing control. If someone sets a limit on what they're comfortable sharing and you push them past it, you're not building intimacy, you're breaking trust. Love, respect, and closeness thrive when people feel safe to express their needs and know those needs will be honored. Crossing that line repeatedly doesn't just strain relationships, it can destroy them altogether. The heart of the issue is respect. When you respect boundaries, you're telling people, I see you, I hear you, and I value you enough to honor what matters to you. When you don't, you're sending the opposite message. My wants are more important than your needs. Nobody wants to feel diminished in that way, and that's why disrespecting boundaries creates distance, resentment, and ultimately dislike. People are more likely to trust, appreciate, and stay connected to those who recognize and respect their limits, because that's the foundation of mutual respect and healthy connection. Acting arrogant or superior is one of those behaviors that instantly creates distance between you and others. Because it signals that you don't see people as equals. Instead of fostering respect, arrogance erodes it. People naturally want to connect with those who make them feel valued, but arrogance does the opposite. It diminishes others while inflating yourself. Whether it shows up as bragging, dismissing opinions, or always needing to be right, arrogance communicates a lack of humility, and humility is one of the most magnetic traits a person can have. When you act superior, you may think you're impressing people with your confidence, but in reality, you're making them feel small, and no one enjoys being around someone who makes them feel less than. Arrogance often masks insecurity. Many people who act superior do so because they're trying to cover up self-doubt. They believe that if they project an image of being smarter, more successful, or more important, others will admire them. The problem is, people are far more perceptive than we give them credit for. They can sense when someone is overcompensating. What arrogance really communicates is not strength, but fragility. It shows that you need to constantly assert your value because you don't feel secure in it yourself. This is why truly confident people don't need to act superior. They let their actions, integrity, and presence speak for them. One of the most damaging aspects of arrogance is the way it shuts down communication. When you act like you already know everything, people stop offering their ideas. When you constantly correct others or belittle their contributions, people stop sharing altogether. In group settings, this can kill collaboration and creativity. At work, an arrogant person might think they're leading, but in reality, they're creating an environment where no one feels safe to speak up. In personal relationships, arrogance shows up as dismissiveness, where one person's thoughts or feelings are treated as less important. Over time, this creates resentment because nobody wants to feel unheard or undervalued. Arrogance also makes it impossible to build genuine connections. People may tolerate you, but they won't truly trust or like you. Trust requires vulnerability and humility, the ability to admit mistakes, acknowledge weaknesses, and appreciate the strengths of others. When you're too busy projecting superiority, you close yourself off from those deeper connections. Relationships become shallow, built on performance rather than authenticity. Even if people admire your achievements, they won't feel close to you because closeness requires equality, not hierarchy. Another reason arrogance pushes people away is that it breeds competition where there doesn't need to be any. When you constantly compare yourself to others or need to prove you're better, you create tension. Instead of celebrating someone else's success, you dismiss it or overshadow it with your own. This not only makes people dislike you, it makes them root against you. Instead of building allies, arrogance builds rivals, and over time, that leaves you isolated. Respect that's built on fear or intimidation never lasts, but respect built on humility and collaboration grows stronger with time. The irony is that most people who act superior are chasing respect and admiration, but arrogance gets them the opposite. People may smile politely, nod, or even flatter you to keep the peace, but underneath they're pulling away. They may respect your accomplishments, but they won't respect you as a person. What truly earns admiration is not acting like you're above others, but showing that despite your successes, you remain grounded, approachable, and willing to learn. Humility doesn't mean downplaying your achievements. It means acknowledging them without using them to diminish others. When you act with humility, people don't just like you. They want to follow you, trust you, and stand with you. But when you act arrogant, people will remember less about how great you said you were and more about how small you made them feel.